Hey everyone, and welcome to the first bonus episode of Might and Magic 6. I did say that we'd be doing a few of these little bonus episodes after we've beaten the game, and indeed, the last thing we did was beat the game. It was quite a while ago now. I've taken a bit of a break, but during that break, I have been doing some preparation for the next LP in the series, Might and Magic 7. I'll talk about that more at the end. For now, let's get into what this video is about. And from the title, you can tell that it has something to do with the spell Lloyd's Beacon and something to do with scrolls. And indeed, I do have a few scrolls of Lloyd's Beacon in my inventory, and we're going to be experimenting with those very shortly. But before we even get into it, you might be wondering why why I'm even interested in this, because Lloyd's Beacon is a spell. Spell scrolls are a tried and true mechanic in this game. You can buy spell scrolls and buy them or find them, and you can use them. And that was Mass Fear, which didn't do anything because there are no enemies around. But yeah, you can use them. They're consumable objects, and they'll give you one instance of the spell that they're for, and then they will disappear from your inventory. And some of them, I believe, are bugged, meaning they don't work properly in scroll form, but most of them will just cast that spell once and then disappear. So what's so special about Lloyd's Beacon? Why care about this? Well, let's refresh our memory. Lloyd's Beacon is one of the two teleportation spells in this game. One being Town Portal, where, that's the basic one, but it only works in 6 towns, so you can instantly go to any of these places. If you wanted to set up a way to teleport instantly to other places, you would have to use this spell, Lloyd's Beacon. And the way that this spell works is that first, you have to set a beacon. Like, if you've newly learned this spell, you won't have any destinations to teleport to. The first thing you would have to do is set a beacon somewhere, and then after that beacon is set, you would then recall it. Think of it as similar to Mark and Recall in the Elder Scrolls games. So this is pretty important. The fact that this is essentially a 2-stage spell, meaning you first set a beacon, then you recall. Now, why is this important? Well, I think Alexis has one free beacon. Yeah, I don't need 2 different Sweetwater beacons. So I'm gonna overwrite this, and I guess I'll, just for the sake of demonstration, set a beacon in Freehaven. Although it's redundant because Freehaven is also a Town Portal destination. But this is just to show you how this spell works. So I've set a beacon, it overwrote it, and importantly, that counted as casting the spell once. You would have noticed, you can rewind the video if you need confirmation, that Alexis had a full mana before she cast it, and after she set it, it did indeed take away 30 mana. So setting a beacon counted as one instance of the spell being used, and obviously, if we then recall the beacon which we just set, I mean, you can see it took away our mana. It didn't look like it did anything because we were literally standing in the same spot where we cast it. But recalling it then counted as casting the spell a second time. That's what makes the fact that there are scrolls of this spell so interesting, because it's a 2-stage spell. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't actually know what's going to happen here. Usually I do my research beforehand, so I know what's going to happen. But this time I thought it might be interesting to just go in blind and experiment, you know, like a mad might and magic scientist, and just to see what happens. Because this is a 2-stage spell, I'm just gonna save my game. What happens if we cast it using a scroll once? What will that accomplish? By the way, I'm using it with Roderick because he doesn't have any elemental magic, so he is not eligible to learn the spell by default. So what happens if we use the scroll on him? Well, again, it gives us the option to set a beacon or recall a beacon, but we don't have any beacons set by Roderick, so I guess the only thing we can do is set a beacon. And as I suspected, the spell has consumed the spell scroll simply by virtue of setting that beacon. Now let's wait for Roderick to recover. And let's now cast this again. And the duration from setting the beacon via the scroll was 35 days. I assume probably 36 days, and it just ticked below 36, so it's probably 35 days, 23 hours and something. So if we recall that, it works as you'd expect. Again, it doesn't look like it did anything because we were standing in the same spot. I guess, just to show you that it is actually working, let's stand here and recall. And now you can see it did take us back to that same spot. So that is pretty interesting. The fact that while it does work in scroll form, it is essentially useless unless you have more than one scroll of the same spell. Whereas if you had a scroll of Town Portal, I think you could just go and teleport in one go. But this one only worked, well, like it worked, but it was only useful when we used 2 scrolls. Now I'm gonna try something else. What I'm gonna do is once again, I'm gonna set a beacon with Roderick. And can I hurry this process? Oh, looks like I can. If I can recall the same beacon. If I exit now, see, it consumed the scroll as I thought it would. Whereas if you go into this screen but then back out, it doesn't take away your mana. Right? You can linger in this screen as long as you want and then back out, and you won't be deducted the spell points. But if you do that with a scroll, I opened this, I backed out without doing anything, but it still consumed the scroll. Alright, that's the second thing I wanted to test. The third thing is, okay, let me set another beacon with Roderick. And now let me give a scroll to Serena. What happens if she casts it? Is it gonna... Well, let's see what happens. Oh no, she gets a separate beacon. Interesting. So what I'm gonna do is I'm now gonna save this game as post game 2 because I right now only have 1 scroll to experiment with this. If I... okay, you know what, this isn't the best way to do this because we were standing in the same spot. So I'm gonna load this game again. I'm gonna set Roderick's beacon staring at this building. I'm gonna set Serena's beacon staring at this tower. Alright, now let's save as post-game 2. And if I give this to Roderick, we can freely recall your beacon. If I give this to... Oh, wrong person. And now if I give this to Serena, we can freely recall her beacon. And it works as expected. Alright. So, it does give each person their own Lloyds Beacon menu, but with only a maximum of 1 beacon instead of 5, and a duration of what I assume is 36 days. Okay. Okay. That's all very interesting so far. I will, you know, talk at length about what this means in terms of the practical value of all this, but before we get to that, I do want to run these little tests, and there is one last test to run, is that we started out by using these scrolls on characters without Lloyd's Beacon, and really that's where they would be most useful, because characters who have Lloyd's Beacon, they can just cast it whenever. But what would happen if a character who has Lloyd's Beacon spell, the Lloyd's Beacon spell in their regular spellbook, uses a scroll of Lloyd's Beacon? And in particular, I want to know is, will this spell mainly, like, will it merely just be an instance of them using their, you know, the beacons they already have? Or will it, like it did with these guys, open up a separate menu where they get their own extra beacon, you know, which lasts for 36 days? So let's find out. Let's cast it with Zoltan and see what happens. Aha, okay. So if the character already knows the spell, it'll only let them interact with their regular beacons. Alright, that's interesting. So we could recall any of these beacons, I assume. Let's just confirm that it works. Yeah, we got to Dragon Sand. No problem. But what happens if we use the scroll with a character who knows the spell, but instead of recalling, we set a beacon? Will it use their regular spell strength, or will it just be the 35 days that we saw with Roderick and Serena? Let's find that out. The suspense is killing me, but we are gonna have to wait for Alexis to recover before we can see what the results are. Ah, okay. It did not use her actual spell strength, because if it did, it would have been 100 plus, because she's got a very high skill, and also items boosting that skill. So it used her actual book of beacons, or whatever you want to call this, and it even let her teleport to beacons she'd already set, but it wouldn't use her skill when setting a new beacon. It just went with its old default duration. Okay. Okay. Now with all of those tests done, let's talk about, you know, the point of this, the significance. And really, based on what we saw, these scrolls are potentially useful, but they would only be useful if you were running a party that couldn't cast the spell normally. Because if you could cast it normally, all you would need is 2 characters who you then take to Master Water Magic, and that would give you 10 beacons, meaning you could put a beacon in every single location that doesn't have a town portal destination, and there are 9 of those. 15 regions in total, 6 of which you can town portal to, and if you put beacons in the other 9, you can do that with just 2 characters. So really, this would only be useful for a party that doesn't have this spell normally. But even so, how useful would it really be? Because it only gave you 1 beacon maximum, and that beacon, well, 1 beacon per character maximum, and that beacon would only last just slightly more than a month. Well, a month in this game is 28 days, so a month and then 8 days on top of that. And I'm trying to see how I would use it if, for example, I was playing either a night only or solo night party or something like that. And the only thing I can think of is that if I really wanted to make use of this, I would hoard a bunch of these scrolls. But as you can see, I've beaten the game and I only have 3 of these. And that is even with me actively searching and trying to keep all of the scrolls that I found. So they aren't easy to find, right? There are so many spells in this game that finding scrolls of any one specific spell, you'll only find a few. So you won't find them naturally. You would have to really, if you wanted to hoard them, you would have to buy them. Now, if you go inside this shop, you'll notice that there is a scroll of Lloyd's Beacon for sale, and that's not just a crazy coincidence. What I did was, prior to starting this episode, this shop was ready to restock, so what I did was I save scummed until they had one of those scrolls in stock. And I guess we've bought that now. We'll just have Zoltan hold on to it. And I covered this in my regular playthrough, but the way that form of save scumming works, and I'll demonstrate it once we get to the other magic shop, is that once a shop is ready to restock, its inventory isn't set until you actually go inside and look at what it is. So this shop, for example, it's got a few spell scrolls for sale, including these high-level spell scrolls. So if you see this spell scroll graphic, that represents the highest class of scrolls. So in any shop where they sell this kind of scroll, even if it's for a different spell, you know that it's going to be capable of giving you a Lloyd's Beacon scroll eventually.
See anything you like?
And as you can see, well, we've actually got some really good spells this time, including Divine Intervention, very rare, Armageddon, very fun spell, Hour of Power, useful spell. So you can get some pretty cool spell scrolls this way, but to really make use of this, you would have to either give yourself permission to save scum, like I'm doing right now, or you would have to forget about preserving your reputation and just wait large periods of time. I think 2 days.
See anything you like?
2 days wasn't enough.
I think it's close.
Let's see how long it takes.
See anything you like?
Okay, it takes a while for shops to reset their stock. So what you would do is you would just keep on waiting until
See anything you like?
the shop restocked. I guess if I was better prepared,
See anything you like?
I would tell you how long it takes for shops to restock, but what I'll do instead is, when I'm editing the video, I'll put a note up here telling you what the duration is you'd have to wait before the shop naturally would refresh its inventory. So going back to what I was saying earlier, what I would do if I was playing a solo night was I would hoard a bunch of these, like as many of these as I could find. I would literally have one character whose inventory was nothing but Lloyd's Beacon scrolls, and having done that, you could then use it as a semi-reliable means of fast travel. Now someone might say, well then what is the point of doing that? You're just duplicating the abilities of classes you don't have, and that defeats the purpose of doing no magic user challenge run. But to that, my argument would be that no, it still is different because of the fact that these spell scrolls are a limited resource. So for me, I have the spell available to me naturally. I can just use it whenever I want. And because all you need to do to get your mana back is rest, essentially it means you can cast it an infinite number of times, to the point where I take it for granted, where I'll teleport somewhere and be like, oh no, I forgot something in the place that I was just in, and then I would literally teleport back and then teleport again to this place, which I would do without a second thought, but which, if I had a limited number of scrolls, an exercise like that would use up 3 of these. So if I had a limited number of these, they would give me an ability to jump around that I wouldn't otherwise have had. But the fact that I can't just use them willy-nilly, and that I have to think carefully before each jump, does mean that the gameplay experience would be different than if I had the spell naturally. So yeah, I think, long story short, I think it could make for some interesting gameplay if you took the time to stockpile enough of these. Alright, I think that's just about taken us to the end of this video, because I don't think there's anything left to investigate on this topic. If I've missed anything, please leave it in the comments, but I think I've covered everything. So that's enough about that. Before I leave off, I think I said at the beginning, I'll give you a bit of an update on how the preparation for the Might and Magic 7 playthrough is coming along. And I know it's been a long time since Might and Magic 6 ended, but what you wouldn't have known, because it was literally the first series in my channel, is how long it took to prepare before I even started doing it. And it took more than a month. And most of that was learning how loot was distributed in the game, and what affects the spawning of artifacts, things like that, and just preemptively troubleshooting things that could potentially go wrong. And I'm doing the same for Might and Magic 7, and it's going well, but it's also it's a more expansive game in some ways, which means there's a lot more to take into account. So I expect within a few weeks I might be ready to start that series. But even if I'm not uploading anything, I am still working on doing it, because as you know, this was a completionist run. I will be doing a completionist run for that game as well, and I impose some strict rules on myself, and I just want to give myself the best chance of doing it when we do start, because I would hate to get like 20-30 hours into it and then realize that I screwed myself because of something that I didn't properly research beforehand. So anyway, that's gonna be enough with that little update, and I think we're done with this episode. So I guess the last thing I should say is, for these bonus episodes, I'm just going to be doing them sporadically, you know, as and when I think of either interesting game mechanics to explore or just quirky little things to do in the game that wouldn't have fit into the regular playthrough. So that's going to be the plan for these, but there's going to be no like set pattern for when I'm doing them or how many of them there are even going to be. What I will say though is that if you think of something fun, something interesting to try, do go ahead and leave it in the comments, and who knows, I may even, if it's crazy enough and fun enough, get around to doing it in a later bonus video. So with that, I think we're done, and I just would like to thank you for watching, and feel free to stick around and see if there's anything else on the channel that you might be interested in. I know for now there's not much, but there's going to be more in the near future. So I hope to see you around. So until then, take care.